There is a farm in Southeast Queensland, somewhere, that is preparing to grow a crop that will look very different to its neighbours. You won't be told where it is. You might be interested to know what it's going to produce. It's going to grow medicinal cannabis, the type doctors can now prescribe patients to treat a range of health issues. It's a big milestone for this farm. Emily Rigby is the Director of Research and Compliance at Cannatrek. Emily, good morning. Congratulations.
Good morning. Thank you.
How hard has it been to reach this point?
Oh, wow. It's been a long road. It's been a couple of years trying to jump through all the hoops and get past all the red tape. But it's fantastic news for us.
And this is red tape in order to grow cannabis?
Yes. Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of regulations that we need to meet, and it's a new industry and a new crop. So while the Australian government and the Office of Drug Control navigate this new space, so do companies that want to get in and start growing to be able to supply Australian patients. And
presumably a good deal of security as well.
Very high level of security. It's basically a prison.
Really? And genuinely, you can't disclose the location of this farm either, can you?
No, so it's at a secret location for obvious reasons.
Give us a sense, though, of what it looks like, how much you will produce.
Sure. So at this facility, we have 3,200 square metres of greenhouse, which is where we'll grow the medicinal cannabis, which will produce probably up to 5 tonnes of cannabis a year.
And then what happens to it once it's grown and harvested, I guess, on your farm?
Sure. So once it's harvested, there's a variety of medicinal products that can be made into. So we'll be doing extraction for oils and capsules, but also you will be able to purchase the dried flower product as well for vaporization.
And does that all happen on site as well?
No, it does get sent off site for the manufacture and packaging.
Okay, so purely your farm is responsible for growing the plant, and then it goes off elsewhere. Are there other farms like this in Queensland, or are you guys the first?
There is another farm that's already producing in Queensland as well. Yeah.
And you have another farm in Victoria as well that's just been granted approval?
Yeah, we're very happy to have received planning approval, which is for a 16-hectare farm in regional Victoria.
Okay, 16 hectares for that one. This one in Queensland is 3,200 square metres, so it's a bit smaller.
A lot smaller, yes.
Emily Rigby is the Director of Research and Compliance at Cannatrek. So a medicinal cannabis farm has just reached the milestone of gaining approval to grow their crop. This crop will be used for medicinal cannabis purposes. You said it's going to be grown in greenhouses, so is it all undercover?
Yeah, so it's all grown under protected cropping. So it's not, you can't see the plant from the outside, but also the plant is protected from any adverse weather events. So if it's very warm, as we have in Queensland, also when it's cold, it's protected from any rainfall, frosts, anything like that. So we're able to provide the optimum microclimate for the plant so that we can produce high quality cannabis with high yields all year round, no matter what the temperature or the weather is outside.
And it's called a cannabis plant?
Yes.
And is it a robust plant?
It is a very robust plant, but then like all plants, if you do want to produce a uniform and high quality product, then you do need to be able to provide those optimum conditions, and that's whether it's cannabis, tomatoes, cucumbers, roses. You do want to be able to provide that uniform microclimate.
So do you have a farming background yourself?
I'm a horticulturalist, so I've come from the ornamental horticulture industry, so cut flowers and nursery plants.
Did you ever imagine you'd be working on a cannabis farm?
No, I definitely did not, but when they changed the legislation back in 2016, I was at that time sort of looking for something different, a different crop, and when they changed the legislation, I knew that was the one for me.
So talk us through the life cycle, I guess, of a cannabis plant. Like, is it planted as a seed, is it seedlings, and how long does it take to reach the stage where you want to harvest?
Sure, so you can grow it from seed, but it's more predominantly done from cuttings, so taking small sections of vegetative cuttings from the plant. It can also be grown using tissue culture. So the reason people end up taking cuttings is because then all of your plants are genetically identical. So if you grow from seed, just like your children, they're all slightly different, even if they come from the same parent plant. So generally in the industry, people use cuttings to be sure that you get that uniformity, which is really important for the end product, that you've got that uniformity. From germination or from the cuttings striking roots, you've basically got about 12 weeks or 3 months before you're harvesting.
Okay, so that's quite quick.
Yeah, it's quite a quick turnaround. So you can have multiple crops a year when you're growing in a greenhouse conditions. If you've got blackout screens, because it's a photoperiod plant, which means it switches over into flowering when the daylight drops below 12 hours.
Really? I've never heard of that. It's a photo period.
Yeah, which means it's affected, so it switches into flowering based on the amount of daylight. So if you were growing the crop outdoors, you'd only be able to have one harvest a year with the seasons. But of course, once you go inside in a greenhouse, or even if you went into a fully indoor facility, you can manipulate the light, and therefore you can provide those correct conditions for that plant to be able to harvest all year round.
How high does a cannabis plant grow?
It varies. So because you can switch that plant over into flowering by reducing the daylight, you can have very, very short plants up to, sort of giant plants. It's really when you decide to switch that over. For the medicinal cannabis industry, most people would be keeping the plants probably around 1 metre. But definitely, I've seen specimens that people grow outdoors, that can be 6-8 feet plus. So
right, okay. So your plants in this greenhouse that will produce 5 tons of medicinal cannabis a year, about 1 metre high. What about the leaves themselves? How big? Because there'll be lots of people who have this kind of. Most people probably see a cannabis plant in a movie, or some kind of a drug bust on TV or something like that.
Yeah, look, the plant really varies depending on its genetics. So we have a lot of different varieties when it comes to cannabis plants. You sometimes hear them referred to as strains. However, it's more correct to refer to them as chemovars or chemical varieties. And so when we look at that diversity, you can have a huge diversity in the leaf shape and size, but also in the height of the plant, in the flower bud itself. So they can be even a variety of different colours, ranging from sort of more greens through all the way through to purples.
Okay. And where have your plants come from originally?
So we are importing some of our genetics, but we also have some genetics that have come from Australia. So it's actually quite difficult because, of course, they need to be legal genetics. So there's not too many places that you're able to actually source those genetics from.
What other countries in the world currently have a legal medicinal cannabis industry, and therefore farms like yours?
Oh, wow. It's we are seeing a rapid global shift, so it's quite hard to keep up. But off the top of my head, I would say it would definitely be over 70 countries, I believe. You've got Canada and the US, although the US is a unique situation because it might be legal in some states, but it's not federally legal. You've got places like South Africa coming online, and South America, Europe. We're really seeing a huge shift around the globe making this plant available.
Emily, would you say that the industry here, which is still, in fledgling stages, is it similar to or based on another country's industry, or is it forging its way in its own unique Australian style?
I think definitely we are looking to some of the other countries that have been doing it for longer, so such as Canada and Israel. I would say there's definitely been a strong influence just because of Australia's ties with Canada.
Did you go to any of those countries researching,
I have, actually. I've been very, very lucky to visit some cannabis facilities in the US and in Canada and Israel. So definitely always as a researcher myself, but always looking at, what are other people doing and how can we improve on that. But definitely in Australia, we've got different climatic conditions. And so I would say we've got much better conditions to be growing cannabis, especially under greenhouse conditions. So in Canada, they grow a lot of their plants 100% indoors, so it's artificial lighting, artificial climate, artificial everything. We've got great sunlight, great climate here in Australia, so we've definitely got more of a beneficial climate to produce a higher quality product grown under natural sunlight, and at a lower cost, because we'll have lower costs when it comes to our operating costs, when it comes to electricity and things like that.
What about water? Is it a thirsty crop?
I wouldn't say it's a thirsty crop. We do grow under protected cropping conditions, so in greenhouses, and using lots of sophisticated technology so that we can limit our water use, and then, of course, recycling our water as well. So really you're not wasting any water except for exactly what the plant needs to use itself, and then we can recycle any of the runoff water that the plant might not take up when we water it, and then that can be reused to water the crop again. And all of our facilities harvest rainwater as well, which is quite critical, especially in Australia and some of the weather conditions.
Years in the making, Cannatrek has just received its approval to grow this crop of medicinal cannabis. You won't know the location, but Emily Rigby is the Director of Research and Compliance at Cannatrek. A couple of weeks ago, I had a gentleman in who was the first patient at the medicinal cannabis clinic here in Brisbane. He had real success with the treatment that he received, which was cannabis oil, but he said, the cost factor for a lot of patients is quite prohibitive. As more and more farms like this come on board, do you anticipate that the cost of medicinal cannabis medication and treatment will come down?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why it's really important that we help facilitate the Australian medicinal cannabis industry, because while we're relying on imported medicines, we don't have control over those costs. And as I said before, being able to produce it in Australia, we'll have lower costs when it comes to producing the plant, because we won't be using electricity for lighting, all day long, because we can use the natural sunlight. And it's really critical that we bring those prices down, because we need to have affordable quality medicine available to Australian patients.
Really appreciate you taking us to a mystery location this morning, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
Emily Rigby, Director of Research and Compliance at Cannatrek. This is ABC Radio Brisbane.